I don't believe in imposter syndrome. It's not a diagnosable sickness, but I do believe very much in the experience of self-doubt and feeling like you're going to be found out and rejected at any moment. It's a natural thing to feel self-doubt, and it is our job to find ways to help ourselves get back to reality and back to facts when we are feeling it. So what I'm giving you is one approach to catch yourself in the moment the imposter shows up and de-escalate it so that it doesn't take over. Welcome to When Does It Get Good? I'm Zovig Garboushian. I'm your host, and today I'm talking to you about imposter syndrome. I recently went to a conference for professional speakers. Now, I have been speaking my whole career. As a marketer, I did tons of client pitches and presentations. As a workplace trainer, I have led thousands of people live, in person, and virtually through different types of leadership development workshops and programming. I was a yoga teacher for a few years. I've hosted events. I've hosted panels. I've been on panels. But speaking as part of my business is relatively new and has been new for the last 18 months or so. And it's a new world for me, which means there are new players and the game is played differently. How you promote yourself as a speaker and build a speaking business is very different than how you would as a coach. So I go to this conference hoping to learn and meet new people and get me more comfortable in how I approach promoting myself as a speaker. And many of the people who were there were about 300 people there, and the majority of them have been speaking for 10, 15, 20, even 30 years. They know the game. People know them. They get talked about when they're not in the room. And I immediately started comparing myself. I felt like I had something to prove. And then I watched some of these keynotes and I kept thinking, I'm not sure I'm ever going to get to this place. Do I even deserve to call myself a speaker? What I was experiencing was the imposter. And I want to share this with you because this can happen to people who are otherwise highly confident, capable, and accomplished. Now, I have worked and continue to work very hard to let go of limiting stories and limiting beliefs that I might have about myself and drop the burden of feeling like I'm not enough. But in this situation, speaking is a new place for me. And much like most achievers I know and work with, we don't always settle well into not knowing what we're doing. Self-doubt is a very uncomfortable place. It's almost a shock to the system to be the new kid in a situation where everyone else seems to know each other and know secrets that we don't know. So I want to talk about the imposter. Now, just in case you don't know or don't completely understand what the imposter experience is, and it's called imposter syndrome, by the way, but I don't like to call it that because it's not diagnosable. And I wrote an article about this. It's called I Don't Believe in Imposter Syndrome. It's for Strive Magazine online. You can Google it if you have a chance. But there's all kinds of literature out there that is debunking the whole syndrome name for this experience. And that is what it is. It's an experience, not a way of life. So let's level set. If you're not totally familiar with the term, you can Google it, read books. There's all kinds of stuff out there. But let me tell you how I define it. It's when we have doubt about our expertise, our knowledge, or our value, and it makes us feel like we don't deserve to be where we are. So if you have experienced it, you might say things to yourself like, I'm only here because I got lucky. Right place, right time. Or they're going to find me out at any moment and they're going to figure out that I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't deserve to be where I am. I'm not as good as I made myself out to be. I've actually had clients question if they lied on their own resume because they were experiencing this imposter experience. You might also think I was probably second choice for this job, or I'm not that great. I just know how to work harder. And then you feel like a fake or a fraud. This primarily shows up at work. Again, it's an experience. And because it's an experience, it's a transient one that can come and go. And I find that the achievers and people who are used to seeing themselves produce results are the ones who have the greatest chance of feeling this way. But this is not who we are. It's just what we feel. And I want to make this distinction because language matters. How we describe ourselves matters. How we talk about ourselves to ourselves matters. If I call myself something, I go and then live into that descriptor. If I call myself a type A control freak, I'm going to go live into that. I will make it true. So if I describe myself as an imposter, it just perpetuates the feeling that I don't belong or I got lucky. I'm validating the experience for myself and it becomes truth. But self-doubt is a natural part of being a human being. And also, we work in environments that can perpetuate the experience of self-doubt. And I want to underscore this, that our world is unfortunately designed more for comparison and proving than it is to welcome the individuality and uniqueness of people. Being the only one or one of a few in an environment can make you feel like an imposter. Being the only woman in the room, the only person of color. So when we're the only one, we feel like we represent an entire community and the feeling of not belonging is heavy and the pressure to not make a mistake is intense because if we make a mistake, then it represents the whole of our community. I mean, you might be the only person in your 40s or 50s at work right now amongst a majority of 20s or 30 somethings, and you might feel like you don't belong there. Maybe you got promoted to a new leadership role and you feel like you have no idea what you're doing. And maybe they shouldn't have promoted you. You could also just work in an organization or an industry that thrives on self-doubt. I can think of two pretty big tech companies that feed on a culture of comparison. One rhymes with Google, the other rhymes with Amazon. And they boast about only hiring the smartest people in the world. So if you get hired, you're always looking over your shoulder for someone else who might be smarter. Like, am I really one of the smartest people in the world? Is that true? Talk about building up some expectations and creating a culture of comparison. I coached a brilliant client, a creative, who worked in an environment where extroversion was rewarded and the introverts either got ignored or told they needed to do more, speak up more, say more, be more assertive. You know the story. This person was an introvert, a natural introvert, and they didn't need to beat their chest. They just wanted to do good work, be creative, and be collaborative with their team members, but they felt forced to self-promote or they might get left behind. So what happens is we're in these environments. It perpetuates the feeling of not being enough or being a fake or not belonging. And so then we start coping. We cope through perfectionism. We cope through over preparing. We fake our enthusiasm for what we're doing so that we can fit in. You know, I worked for 15 years in marketing and advertising, and I found myself faking a lot. I could not get excited about the new clients that we got. I couldn't get excited about the things that many of my team members did because it wasn't congruent with who I was. And I didn't see what all the hubbub was about because all I thought was, great, we're going to sell more things to people who don't need it. That's where my head was. So I had to fake a lot of times. And all of this faking is why we feel like imposters, because we're behaving in ways that aren't natural to us. All of the proving and the perfectionism and the coping, that's not natural behavior. Sometimes even just being new to something can make you feel like you're an imposter, like me at this conference. The story was that I had in my head was, I only did 5 keynotes last year and only one of them was on a stage. The rest were all virtual, so they don't really count. Most of my speaking is in the trainings that I lead, and that's not a keynote, so that doesn't count. What I'm telling you right now is really what went through my mind. But these are some of the diminishing thoughts that a person who's feeling self-doubt or this imposter can think. I felt a huge need to prove myself. I was amongst performers for 3 days. So I was performing in my conversations. I talked more than I should have. I pushed myself to be what I thought I should be because I felt like the speaking that I've done wasn't enough to count as a speaker. And not for nothing, but last year I led over 40 trainings. I did do 5 keynotes. 4 of them were virtual. I was on maybe 15 webinars I hosted. I guested on 10 or 11 podcasts before I started my own, but I diminished all of that. I decided it wasn't real speaking. It didn't count, and people were going to find me out. We do this to ourselves. We say what I've done doesn't count. If I didn't do it alone and I asked for help, then it doesn't count. If I don't know everything, then I know nothing, so it doesn't count. They don't really like what I'm doing. They're just doing me a favor or being nice to me. Do you understand how crazy that thinking sounds? Do you get how wild it is that we would talk about ourselves this way? It is ridiculous for me to diminish myself as a speaker just by looking at the pure data, the numbers that I rattled off. And it's ridiculous for you to diminish your expertise and experience. You are not lucky. You were not just in the right place at the right time. You didn't fool anyone. You created where you are and you're ready for it. Valerie Young, who is the author of Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, and I think she's the most prominent researcher of the imposter experience. She calls it imposter syndrome, but she's got a book all about it. She's got a whole institute, and she has a great quote in that book that says, "You are already successful. You just don't own it." So I implore you, when you feel the imposter feelings, consider the source. Is it true? Or is it just the design of the place that you're in? Now, even though this stuff doesn't come from within us, we don't wake up in the morning and decide I'm going to be the best faker that I can or try to pull the wool over people's eyes. It is still on us at the individual level to take charge of that story because no one is going to de-escalate my imposter spiral for me but me. So then what do you do? Again, I've read a bunch of books about this. In fact, I led a 3-hour workshop on this 2 weeks ago for a group of 30 plus leaders at a New England university. There's all kinds of ways to address this for yourself. So you could go Google something and find out some great tips to help you. I also asked ChatGPT because ChatGPT knows some things. There are lots of ways to address this, but all of them revolve around you taking control of the story in your head. So for this workshop I did, what I created was a framework called R.E.A.L. R-E-A-L. I love acronyms. Acronyms are easy for people to understand and remember. And it stands for 4 actions that you can take to help yourself get through and debunk the imposter BS. I called it real because when we are in the imposter, we need to get back to reality. We need to get real. So I'm going to walk you through this. The R is for recognize. Recognize when you are in the imposter experience in the moment and name the thoughts and the feelings that are coming to you with that experience. Just like I named for you the types of thoughts I was having about myself at that conference, you have to do the same thing. Name the thoughts and the emotions that come with the experience. Because if you name them, you become present to them so you can address them. The thing about our thoughts and emotions is that they often take off before we even have a chance to corral them. So naming your thoughts and emotions in the moment or as close to the moment as possible takes some practice because a lot of our negative thinking has become habitual. So when something's a habit, it can be very hard to rein in. And before you know it, you're in the pantry at 9 o'clock at night eating chocolate. I don't know anybody who does that, but I've heard that it happens. Now, if I could have paused in the moment I was feeling like a fake at the conference, I could have named what I was feeling and given myself the opportunity to question it. Sometimes just by saying what we're feeling, it disempowers the feeling. If I say, "Oh, I'm really anxious right now," it actually disempowers it. It's kind of like putting a pin in a very full balloon. It slowly starts to let the air out. And then we can remind ourselves that emotions are not facts. They are information. Our emotions are not facts. They are information that there's something we need to attend to. So that's R. Recognize the thoughts and emotions that are happening in the moment or as close to the moment that you are experiencing your version of the imposter. The E is for examine. Examine and evaluate how true these thoughts and emotions are. We have to evaluate our thinking. If we're not checking ourselves and the thoughts that we come up with, we'll just be living in our heads, making stuff up, usually stuff that does not support us. Most of our thoughts come and go and are based on nothing. We have these assumptions and interpretations about everything that happens around us, and then we make those assumptions and interpretations true. And then we live into them in our behaviors, and then our behaviors match those assumptions and interpretations. So it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy. So questioning our thoughts is critical. The thoughts that I had at the conference, 100% absolutely did not work for me. They worked against me. And you know what? I didn't have a lot of fun. I felt more stress than anything. If we don't gain control of our thinking, we lose control of ourselves. If we don't gain control of our thinking, we lose control of ourselves, because our thoughts are pretty much the only thing we have true control over. It's not your husband. It's not your wife. It's not your friends. It's not your politics. It's not your kids, and it ain't your dog. So if you are interested in questioning your thoughts and examining how true they are, ask yourself 2 questions. Where did I learn this? How do I know this to be true? These questions are like an instant moment of perspective. Had I done this for myself at the conference, I might have had a very different experience. So there's R for recognize, there's E for examine, and then there's A for acknowledge. Now we're at the point where we need to begin to acknowledge real facts. Raise your hand if you sit down regularly and write down all of the achievements, talents, skills, and value that you bring to the world. Go ahead. I'll wait. I'm guessing you did not raise your hand. But honestly, if you did, please email me at zovig@boldnessablaze.com, because I really want to talk to you because you're ahead of the game. For the rest of us, though, we have to find a way to regularly acknowledge ourselves. Just like I did a moment ago when I rattled off all the ways in which I actually do really professionally speak. You have to do that for yourself. Your education, your experience, your personal triumphs, your professional wins, those are the facts. And when we have facts, we can come back to the facts as our source of truth. That becomes our home base when we start to feel self-doubt. When I start to get pushed around by the winds of the imposter and feeling like I don't belong, I come back to my facts. So what are your facts? So we have recognize, we have examine, we have acknowledge, and now the L, leverage. Leverage your awareness around your thoughts and your feelings and your facts and rewrite this story. At some point, taking charge of that narrative and telling ourselves who we really are is critical. We have a handle on our thoughts. We have a handle on how we're feeling. We have a clear inventory of the value that we bring. Now you just have to have a clear understanding of who you really are. For me, I realized that the alternative to my story was, I am not a new speaker, but it's new to my business, and business takes time to build. I speak in a variety of ways, and all are valuable and paid. That's a very different story than I did all of these things and they don't actually count. Once we change the story, though, we have to then commit to it. So I've done exercises like this with my clients where we rewrite the story. We change the narrative. We come up with an alternative version, something that's more in support of them. And it all feels good in the moment. Like, yeah, that's my new story. That's what I'm going to do. But then we have to commit to it. We have to choose that story in the moments where it is the hardest thing to do. It is really hard to let go of those habitual negative thoughts because we're used to them. We're used to them. They are the devil we know. It's time to cozy up to the angel we don't, which is our story, the one that we wrote of our choosing. This does not have to be an extensive, long experience of rewriting this story. This can be just before you're getting pulled into an impromptu meeting with several senior leaders, and you know that they're going to ask you a bunch of questions. You just excuse yourself, you go to the restroom really quick, you catch your breath, and you get connected to your facts and remember why they are calling you in to that meeting and not someone else. This is called mental fitness. It is self-care 101. This is doing the work of attending to ourselves. Self-care is not an Instagram post. Self-care is doing the hard work of attending to ourselves in the moments where we feel the pressure and the intensity. If we're going to have a good relationship with ourselves, then getting at things like the imposter is vital, because the more those things happen and they're not regulated, the more our confidence is eroded and our self-esteem decreases. So R.E.A.L, get real when you are in the imposter experience. Recognize, examine, acknowledge, and leverage. So that's it for now. I'm going to share some of these resource links with you in the show notes because there is a ton of stuff out there about the imposter experience, how to get yourself through it, just some things that you can read and listen to if you experience the imposter. You are not alone. And the more that we talk about these moments, the more vulnerability we bring to them, the more normalized it becomes and the less power these imposter experiences have. All right, so we'll take care. Another episode coming out in 2 weeks. Lots of love and big energy. Bye for now. Hey, it's Zovig. Listen, if you want to know more about coaching with me, then go to my website, boldnessablazecoaching.com, and sign up for my newsletter. I know, another newsletter, but yes, another newsletter. People love it. And I know this because I get replies every month asking me, how do you know what's going on in my head? So visit boldnessablazecoaching.com and sign up today.